So whatever is not there that you feel like, why is this not there? It's because you haven't created it, right? No one is coming to create it, so you have to create it. So that's my perspective. So why hasn't poetry made a splash? Because we haven't made it to make a splash, right? Why is this not popping? It's because you haven't made it to pop.
Welcome back to yet another episode of Capture the Thoughts. I always tell people that we have been so blessed to have amazing guests on the show, and today is no different because we are joined by content creator, storyteller, a presenter, a radio presenter, a spoken word artist. Welcome to the show, SoProfound.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. We're so excited. How does it feel to be on the other seats?
It's always exciting. It's always exciting. For the most part, because I'm the one doing the question, so it's very relaxing and very different. At least it gives me perspective to what people feel and think when they sit at the other side. It makes me better, actually.
That's good. That's good. So tell me about your background and your upbringing. What was life like for you growing up?
So I grew up in Waterfalls. I'm a son of a middle class citizen who was renting a house in Parktown at the time, 194 Fifth Avenue. It's the four of us. I'm number 3. It's my brother, my sister. I'm number 3. Then my younger brother. Life was very simple, man. I grew up at a time when my parents were not around a lot because they were trying to be property owners. So they were working around the clock. Mom was an entrepreneur, so she was running a couple of businesses out of town. So she was never home that much. And dad, on the other side, was working around the clock for Marx at the time. And rarely saw him. He came home around 8 p.m. So I did a lot of growing up in an unsupervised environment. But because I was growing up in an unsupervised environment, I guess there was always a chip on my shoulder to do my best, if I could call it that. Plus, also when they were around my parents, they always made sure that they really showed us exactly what they expected of us, and I took that to heart. And there were also many great people along the way who made sure that we grew up the right way. We were respectful. We were. It was just a different environment, man. My brother and sister were much older than I was, and I was in primary school, and my younger brother was always with mom away because she was moving around and stuff. So I was like a loner in a way, but that allowed me to want to venture out and look for people to connect with. First, it was a friend of mine who stayed next door to our house. His name was Alan. We developed a really great friendship, and from there, I was never so much into TV because I was always alone at the house. So whenever I'd come back home from school, the goal wasn't to watch TV. It was to get out and try to find other kids to connect with. So that's, I think, where I then became a very people person. I think that's when my broadcasting career started out. Because you had to figure out ways to connect with the other kids so that you can, not just from your street or from next door, but to in the other street and the other street and the other street. You're interacting with different backgrounds, different realities, and you still have to fit in and navigate that social world. That's when I started to learn all of that. That's pretty much a lot of my childhood. So whilst others were watching cartoons, I was trying my best to get out and connect with other kids based off of the idea that my environment there was not much happening in my environment. There were never people in my environment. So I had to journey out and look for that. in other people. That's why I value a good conversation, a good debate. You always find me where that is happening. I think it came from that because that's what sustained me in the environments I was sustained in.
That's so good. So you're basically an explorer in a sense.
Pretty much. But also, it might sound very contradictory, but I'm such an introvert at my core.
Really, you sound very extroverted.
It's a performance for the most part. It's a performance. I don't mind going out and doing that, but it is after a while. I really want to retreat to my own space. I value my space and being in a very I don't want to say but I like my company. So yeah, but it all balances itself out, I guess.
As a fellow introvert, I can totally relate to that as well.
So I can come here and have a gas with you guys for 2 hours, and make sure that I am not weird about it or anything like it, and that everyone is having a great time. I enjoy the moments that are there, but after a while, I want to get back to my shell and recharge and do that again, recharge and do that again. So, and I enjoy people as well. I enjoy people so much. I care for people. I value people. So I guess it balances itself out.
That's good. So I understand you're a Christian, and so how did you make that decision to follow Christ?
There are a lot of the long and short of it is that I went to a boarding school called Deure High School in Gutuaya, in Gutu Mpandawana. It was a mission school, and the thing about the mission school, it was a Church of Christ. So the thing about a mission school, especially the one that I went to, it had a strong Christian background, but also it having a strong Christian background or rules around it, just how church was important and a lot of that. There were also strong student-led initiatives around just Christianity and what have you. So the first time I had an encounter that was so vivid was Form 3, preached to by a girl called Tatenda Mnyaradzi. And she was so phenomenal, man. And I remember that so vividly. But it that's when the consciousness that, man, I want to do this came into play, but I never really followed through with it. O-level came about, wrote my exams, finished my exams. At the time, my brother was going to a church called Glad Tidings in the neighborhood. And Sundays I never used to go to church. He would go to church. Then he started encouraging me to come to church. Then started going to church. And similar to when I was Form 3, had that same encounter, but now more potent and just more powerful. And preached to by Pastor Charles Jonasi, Bishop now. And 4 February 2008, I got saved. And I was 17 at the time. And I've been a Christian ever since. Been serving, ministry, the works. And that's my life, really. So, yeah.
How did that impact your understanding of yourself and your place in the world?
I was very... So, I grew up in a household where there was no... we didn't go to church growing up because my parents were never around. So a lot of what used to guide how I saw life was very borrowed, because you're interacting with a lot of people, families, and what have you. And there was a lot of self-doubt, if I could call it that. I was unaware of who I am. And getting to know Christ and what Christ did for me on the cross started to illuminate who I was in him and why that was important, that I saw myself that way. It impacted even I always thought I wasn't good enough, strange enough. So I would always retreat or be at the back of the line. But learning who I was in Christ really started to heal a lot of those insecurities, and a lot more that was happening in my life at the time as a teenager who was just trying to figure it out. It made not sense, but it completed me in a lot of ways. And also church completed the idea of family. By the time I was 17, my parents had separated. So, my parents had separated, and church became the completion of a lot of things that you probably didn't see growing up or you were not privy to growing up. So, man, getting saved literally saved my life. Like,
That's beautiful.
It really did, because I would have gone rogue. The trajectory of a lot of the people who were my age going through life at the time, where they are now, a lot of them, it's a total mess. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful. And I think that will encourage listeners who are in a similar situation where they're looking for a sense of belonging, a sense of family. And so let's move on to your purpose journey. How did you get into poetry?
I when I was in high school, I went to a school that was very academic, where the coolest thing there was scoring straight A's or being in the science class. So you were pursuing the cool. You want to be cool. You want to be hip, as any other teenager who's at a high school would want to be. So there was no sports program. We only had 4 at the school: soccer, netball, volleyball, basketball. Only. And of course, athletics. The full. I was not good at athletics. Volleyball, but it wasn't cool enough. Definitely not netball. Basketball, yes, loved basketball. And that. And the next best thing after that was there was no arts program. The only thing that was close to there was public speaking and quiz and debate. In fact, it wasn't called public speaking. It was just quiz and debate, right? And so there was a limitation. So in and around the school, in the student-led initiatives, in the Christian groups or whatever it is, church, people would then start to form little choir groups, dance groups, and whatever it is. And that was more interesting to me outside of being part of a basketball team that came only one season. This happened all year round. So I was that's when I started to explore my creativity. Was never a technical guy. Book smart, yes, but was never a technical guy. And started to explore my creativity. Became a dancer at a certain point.
Really?
Was in a dance group for quite a while. Was an esteemed dancer, actually.
Wow, okay.
Then that came to an end after O-level. Then we went for our O-level break. During our O-level break, still continued with the dancing thing, but okay. Then changed schools, went to Gutu High after that. And Gutu High was much more of a liberal school, unlike my previous school. Where my previous school people were so strict on the books, Gutu High was so liberal, man. It was so liberal. It was more, they had a poor sports program, but they were more, they had a more artsy flair to them. So there was actual drama, there was speech, there was all these things, right? And I started to meet people who were so aware of their creative gifting so much. Then I started to pursue public speaking at the time, and man, I was so good at it. Public speaking was in the junior parliament, and A-level was done. Great. A-level break, we start to experiment with, everyone at the time was trying to be a rapper. We're trying to be hip hop. Yeah. Hip hop. Me and my boys were actually good. I wasn't good at rapping. It didn't come to me so easily. The flow, the cadence, the what. And I was honest with myself. Then I went to the Manenberg this one time. We're looking for an event called The Circle, which was a hip hop event. It used to happen every last Saturday of the month, and we got the dates wrong, and we got there, and there was no circle. There was an event called Mashoko that was hosted by Magamba Network, and it was Mashoko, the poetry, the spoken word and hip hop event. I went there. I watched Upmost perform. I was so blown away. I watched Upmost perform. Was so blown away. Then I also watched PSP and Flowchart perform, and for the first time in my life, I said that's what I want to do. I liked the impact of what it did to me, and I desired it for myself to say I wanted to do that. But it came from a place of discovery, of just being self-aware to say I'm not good at this, but I want to pursue a creative gifting. And that's when I discovered poetry, started to pursue, sharpen my craft, started to write, started going for poetry slams, and wanted to know what my voice was, discovering my voice, what the message was, and etc, etc, etc. And that's the journey of discovery. The reason why I took that trail was to just, because sometimes it just feels like it's something that I always knew. No, I didn't know. I was not exposed to it. But when I did, it clicked. Like, that's it. That's it. Actually, there's a good place to fit in this. Every creative, we go through the level of the first level, which is where you are. Okay, never mind.
Please do continue. This sounds very intriguing.
No, let's go.
Okay, then. So poetry, people would argue that it hasn't made much of a splash in Zim. Were there points where you felt discouraged because of your context, the context that you're living in, and also it's a creative kind of pursuit? So, did you feel like I can actually? Did you feel sometimes that can I actually make it in this thing?
So maybe I'm too much of an optimist, or I look at it always from a different perspective. I wouldn't have made it on the radio if I wasn't a poet. Right? My mark on the radio is because I had learned the art of connecting and performance from the poetry stage. So, being a poet is what opened the door for me to meet Rutendo Mahofa, who introduces me to ZFM and ZFM. So, is poetry not, like, how do you look at it? How do you measure it?
Yeah.
Because without poetry, I wouldn't have met the person who then opens the door to that thing. So, and then you make it so big on radio, and you start getting all these opportunities within radio to get paid, to travel, to do all these things. But that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't performed and you hadn't met that person, and that person hadn't opened that door. So how do you measure
the impact?
Like, how do you measure that? Number one. Number two, also, I want to say this. I want to figure out how I can say this well without sounding very arrogant. But I don't think I've ever struggled in my poetry career.
Wow.
Here's why I haven't struggled. Because at any given point, I'm almost always aware what we are supposed to do to unlock the next level. So when I started off, there were limited platforms. If you're not performing at the book cafe, you are not performing at all. So there was already a problem with that model. it meant that we needed to create platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was not struggling then when no one was booking us because I was aware of what we need to do to make this thing grow. So that's when we started to take the poetry out of spaces, started performing churches, youth groups, and a lot of that. And that then creates a whole movement of new kids who had never been exposed to this or anything like that. But whilst we are at that, then you discover that, wait a second, I've performed 50 times this year and I've not been paid for the 50 times. So what do we need to do? So it's a process of evolution of saying, wait a second, this is what we need to do. What we need to do is start being organized, is to put value to this, is to put XYZ to this, right? Is to diversify. How do we diversify? When you say you are a poet, what you're saying is you're a writer. But if you're a writer, if you can write a poem, you can write copy for an advert. If you're a poet, you can write this, you can write this. Like you already have that sixth sense as a creative to write anyway and create something that someone would connect with. So you're a writer. So how do we put value on you? How do we build a brand around you? How do we create all of that around you so that it can connect? So it's not struggle. It's knowing what you have to do next, right? For example, right now I'm in a place in my life where I wasn't active within the poetry scene. For example, 2013, there about 14, it was so evident when everyone was crazy about P4CM, for example. I remember I was with Peggy, I was with Tati, I was with a lot of guys. I'm telling the guys that, guys, the next stage for us is content. People are so crazy about P4CM, but they've never been to Zim because they're sharing their content, right? What we need to start doing is to create content and started to champion the next. So is it struggle or it's evolution? It's learning, right? So then the content era is ushered. Then I took a dip for a bit, started to focus on media and a lot of that. Then came back now, and the mandate is clear. We need to create quality platforms. Poetry doesn't have quality platforms. A platform that you want to go out, it's clean fun, it's you dress up, you and your friends, you go there, you feel really great about yourselves. It doesn't go on for the whole night. It's you're having coffee, you're having muffins, and it's just amazing, right? We don't have those quality platforms where someone can say, I want to take out my girl out on a date and I want to take them out to that show. And it feels like, wow, this was a great experience. This was a great date, right? We don't have those experiences. So, and we then start earning. So, and everyone gets paid. So is it struggle or it's a process?
Sounds like a matter of perspective.
So I think it's perspective. So I don't think I've ever struggled. Even when I was not getting paid, I was not complaining because I was learning and I was understanding what we need to do next so that we can get to that place of this is it. Like we've gotten to that place. But imagine when I didn't have when I only had one platform to perform. Then we started to get a lot more platforms outside that one platform to perform. Do you think I was complaining that, oh no, I'm not getting paid, or I was just happy that I'm performing in many other places and I'm sharing this gift with a broader audience? What do you think?
I think you were happy.
Exactly, because I used to perform just once a month. Now I'm performing 6 times a month.
Wow.
I am happy that I'm performing. So before you get to the realization that, wait a second, I'm using my resources to get to these events, at least let me get them to say, hey, can you pay for my transport? Can you take care of my expenses? So what used to be, I'm using my resources, becomes a $20 note that you're given to come and perform. But the $20 note becomes, hey, I'm not going to charge you, but take care of my expenses and at least give me an honorarium that goes with it, and becomes $50. So what was no money at all becomes $20, becomes $50, becomes I charge this much to come and perform for you guys. If it's corporate, if it's this, then you start getting the corporate gig and this gig, and you fly out to the Netherlands, and you go to South Africa, and you go to Zambia, and you're getting bookings in all these places. Is that struggling, or it's a process?
It's a process.
Thank you. So I don't think whatever. So here's how I see it. Whatever that's not happening in the environment that you're asking, why is this not happening? It's because you haven't created it. Who do you want it? I was having the same conversation with people. Why do we have a transport system in Zimbabwe? Because the people in Zimbabwe have not created one. Why don't we have anything that you think is terrible, right? It's because the people in Zimbabwe hadn't created one. No one is coming, guys. No one is coming. If we don't create it for ourselves, no one is coming. So just being aware of that allows us to do more and to see it from a different perspective. So if we hadn't created in good company, then you were not going to get the platform where it does the things that it does. Before Jacaranda Music Festival existed, there was no festival that was doing that. So whatever is not there that you feel like, why is this not there? It's because you haven't created it, right? No one is coming to create it. So you have to create it. So that's my perspective. So why hasn't poetry made a splash? Because we haven't made it to make a splash, right? Why is this not popping? It's because you haven't made it to pop. Why is Japreza hot? Because the people who management him, they say they wanted to pop and they did, right? And it's the same. It's true of everything. Before this podcast existed, where was it?
It was non-existent.
Exactly. And you thought that it should exist, right?
Yeah.
So now someone's saying, there are a lot of podcasts in Zimbabwe, like this podcast and that podcast and that podcast. The reason why they're saying that is because you thought, like, I think a podcast that does this should exist. And you made it to exist. And if we had more people who thought from that perspective, we would create the places and the things that we want to see.
I love that. That is so inspirational. I think people are held back by the fear of there's this negative perception that things just don't work in Zim, and people are held back by that. And so I think just the desire to take the initiative.
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. They were about to leave for the UK. And we're having the conversation. They're like, no, so I'm leaving, da, 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 da. And they wanted me to say what I think. I'm like, great. Go kill it, bro. Like, what do you think, though? I'm like, I don't think anything, right? About, what do you mean? I said, because you're leaving because this place doesn't work for you, right? But here's the kicker. Whatever you think is not working for you right now, there's never a time you're going to come back and it's working for you because you haven't created it, right? So fingers crossed that at some point you're going to come back and things are working. Who has created it? Who has created it? Like, who has made it to work? Right? So whatever sphere that you're in, if there's something that's not working, like, and you see that it's not working, then make it work. I think that should be the attitude. But I guess to each their own.
To each their own.
Yeah.
So you've touched on this, but how did you, clearly you're passionate about storytelling and telling stories that people don't know of, or just by highlighting certain aspects of Zimbabwean cultural life. And we've seen some of the stuff that you've done on YouTube. And so how did you make that shift from poetry? You've touched on how you became a radio presenter. And how did you make that shift to content creation from that?
So there's a comedian called Michael Jr. From the US, Christian comedian, one of my favorite people, really great guy. He gave this analogy at this conference that is stuck with me. He was at this main conference, and he has a segment called break time. Break time is where he doesn't exercise at this conference. And at this point, his break time was he picked out a certain gentleman in the audience and asked him, "Sir, what do you do?" Then says, "I'm a high school music school teacher." Said, "Great. Can you sing me something?" Then the guy is given the mic and he sings Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. And he kills it. Like kills it. Okay. Then he says, "That was amazing." People erupt with like applause. And then he says, "Okay, now I want you to imagine that you just lost your uncle. Your dad is locked up in prison. Your daughter just was involved in a car accident, and your bank is, you don't have money in the bank to help out in any way. I want you to sing the same song." Then he sings Amazing Grace, but this time he sings it from a really deep and emotional place. Then he gives the analogy that the first time you sang, you knew what you were singing. But the second time you sang, you knew why you were singing. So when you know the why, the what matters more. In my case, the reason why I was inspired when I heard Flowchild and PSP perform, or Upmost perform, was because I also believed I had something to say. That's the first thing. But what is it that I wanted to say, right? Because poetry was just a what. It's just a medium. So I had to discover my why. Why was I so moved by this? Because I also had something to say. So poetry is the what. Radio is just a what. Writing a book is just a what. A podcast is just a what. If you notice, whether I am being a poet, I'm on radio, I'm making a documentary, I'm producing one, I'm directing, I'm doing all those things. It's the same thing. I'm telling stories in all of them. Like, it's the same thing. It's just the what that's changing. Because the what can change. 10 years ago, podcasting was not prominent. It was there, but it was not prominent. It's now prominent, so it just becomes a what. For all I know, maybe in the next 3 years, there's going to come out something that's also a what. And we're going to hop onto it, and it's just a what. It's not the why. The why remains the same, but the what changes. So a lot of the times as creatives, we box ourselves in the thing that we discovered first.
Yeah.
But it's just a what, right? Allow yourself, identify yourself with the why. Anywhere you're going to find me telling great stories. Great stories about the kingdom and where I'm from and how and what about home. Okay, you're going to find me telling stories about home. Home being, what is home to me, right? So, and how you connect all those dots to who I am. But who I am is devoid if there's no Christ in who I am, right? So you're going to always find me telling stories about home. That's why I'm so passionate about this country, Africa, about the things that we're doing here and how we can make them better, the audiences, and a lot of that. I'm passionate about that for that very reason. So there was not much change. It's the same thing. The same thought process behind trying to create a great poem is the same process in deciding what story you want to tell in documentary format, what to do within a link, who to interview, and why you want to interview them. If you notice, I just don't interview anyone.
Yeah.
Right? I pick and choose who I want to interview because for me, it's about why I want to interview them. Right? Why it's important that someone hears their story and how we present that story and how we make people connect with that story. and how it connects to home, right?
Mm.
That's it. So there was not much change there. It's the same thing, just different, just
That's good.
just different mediums.
Mm. And so, how have you seen God move in your journey? How have you seen His hand move?
I am nothing without God, man. I am nothing without God. Uh look, people like me are not supposed to be here. We come from such broken places, man.
Mm.
So to walk into any room and someone thinks I'm worthy, but like it's only God who can make it so. Like how? What do
Mm.
you mean I'm worthy, right? Uh, yeah, like I'm nothing with. I've seen, and when I say I've seen His hand, I don't mean in a materialistic sense. That's been great, but at every turn, there's never a point where I can say I did that because I know myself. Like, there's never a point where I say I did that. It can only be God. It can only be God. Uh, it's yeah, it's only Him where I can be at a platform and do something that people think is worthwhile. I'm so aware of that, and I never want to take it for granted that that's my reality. So everything, like, what do you mean I'm on I'm on Z and I become one of the top personalities there? What do you mean by that?
Mm.
I went to go to high school. Like, what do you mean? I was at Deode High School. What do you mean that um I go for to perform in the region in Europe and just do the most, perform in the States and do all these things and afford to have a really great life and uh how how is that even possible? Like, so yeah, I'm nothing without God, man,
Mm.
and I'm aware of that.
That's really good. That's really good. Just giving Him the glory and attributing all of it to Him. And so, what has been the lowest point in your journey, and how have you managed to get through that, or how has God helped you get through that?
I don't think I can pick a certain period as lowest because it's a journey of highs and lows. Uh, at any given point, because there are certain moments where I thought were lows until I experienced the other moments. And you're like, oh snap, that's not a low at all. So, um, yeah, 2019, 19 was a tough year. I was so detached. I was burnt out. I I missed myself. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, where you miss yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed myself. I was so burnt out. Then I'd never taken a break ever since I started, and took a break for the first time, and I was so done. I was so done. I was ready to walk away from everything. That's how burnt out and just over all of this I was. But took a break and that worked wonders. And in the process, I did a lot of writing. I did a lot of reconnecting, and I was reminded of my why I started. So, yeah.
That's good. That's really good. And so, what would you say to someone who's trying to figure out their identity and their purpose?
I think just do. Just do it, man. I don't. We spend a lot of time in our heads trying to figure it out from a very intellectual standpoint. I don't think that's how you do it. Here's why. I wouldn't have bumped into poetry if I wasn't pursuing being a rapper and learning that this is not what I like. But for me to get to that place, I then had to go to the circle, trying to go to a hip hop event, then bumping into what I genuinely like, which then becomes part of my journey. And whilst I'm being a poet, you then discover that what I really enjoy about this is having something to say and connecting with someone authentically and telling a great story. I love that. But I can also do that on the radio. I can also do that on television. I can also do that through a documentary. Do that through a book, through a podcast, through this. And you learn that. And when someone then sees it from the outside, it then looks like, this guy just woke up and he knew exactly what he wanted to do. That's not true. You have to do it. Like, you have to do. There are things you only discover until you start doing. Until you start doing. Like, it's not gonna just like fall into your lap and say, this is what you're supposed to do. No, do it. Discover. It's a process of discovery. Even Jesus spent time being a carpenter. Jesus spent time being a carpenter until he started his ministry. So if Jesus spent time being a carpenter, then why are you not doing what you're supposed to be doing? So do it. Like, do you think you are called to be a voice, whether on the radio, on the whatever it is? Start that podcast. Discover the process. In the process, you're gonna find yourself. You always find yourself. There are things that you gravitate towards and things that you don't gravitate towards. There are things you like and things that you don't like, right? I'm in the production life cycle. But in the production life cycle, I don't like anything technical. I don't like any. I've tried to learn how to edit. I hated it. I've tried to use the camera. I don't like it, right? I exist in ideation and I exist in content execution. So I would rather direct. I would rather see the story come to life on a storyboard. I would rather be the showrunner. I would rather be a lot of these other things. But me being the guy holding the camera, I don't like that. But I needed to go through it to learn that, hey, you actually don't like this. And this is not you, right? In radio, imaging. Imaging is the sound effects and all of that. For example, the Radiant Culture podcast, that's imaging. Like, it gives you an image of what the product is going to be. So sound engineers and sound designers do that. I tried to do that. I've got lots and lots of imaging material that I can use, but I even created some imaging for my shows, but I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. I don't think it's fascinating, right? But I know people who are so good at it, who will take you to town and back about it, and it's discovery, right? So to someone who wants to discover their purpose, know who they are, do stuff. Do stuff. It's not gonna fall on your lap because you're thinking it's great. Do it. Do it some more. Do it 5 times more and see how it comes out.
Yeah, it's so key not to remain static or just in the same space, but to actually keep on moving.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah. So we have reached the end of this episode. Yeah, this was really good.
What did you learn about me?
I learned a lot. Like, basically your journey, which I think it just gives me a holistic understanding of who you are and why you create content. I learned the importance of just going out and initiating and creating, and just where you get your passion from.
But I can't say this enough, but whatever that doesn't exist, and you think Zimbabwe is terrible because it doesn't exist, well, it doesn't exist because you haven't created it. If you're waiting for someone to create it, it's not gonna happen. actually, someone might create it, someone might profit from it, but they might not do it to the level that you thought it should be done.
That
So
is so true.
just do it. One last anecdote. So I went to the States and I was making a documentary about the small town called Manning. Manning is a town in Iowa. It's a farming town, or used to be a farming town. So the thing about small towns is that there's a phenomenon that a lot of these small towns in rural communities, especially in the Midwest, are dying because there's no more continuity. So because they're farming towns, the families send their kids to college, but the kids, instead of come to big cities to college, instead of coming back, they don't want to come back because they don't want to stay in the rural area and take over the farm and whatever you. So when the parents get old and they die, the farm is probably sold off to this massive company and whatever you. So the communities are then dying. But Manning is the opposite. Manning is a town of 1,500 people and is thriving.
Wow.
It's thriving. They started to diversify and industrialize the place and do a lot of great things in there. There's actually a housing shortage. There are a lot of things. But I went to investigate why. The documentary is about why Manning is the community it is and why it's thriving. It's because the people of Manning take ownership of the place. So if something doesn't exist, they don't complain about it. They ask, how can we make it exist? If the school, they want something in their school, the kids, they say, the kids who go to the school, our kids, our grandkids, our friends' kids. So we're going to donate to the school. We're going to make sure the school has the best standards. We're going to make sure that these guys have the best teachers, the best coaches, the best whatever it is. So whilst we are complaining that Groombridge Primary is terrible, how can it not be terrible when we are not investing back into it?
Yeah.
How can it not be terrible if we are not maintaining the fields? How can we not be terrible if we are not giving back to it? But when we make some money, do you know what we do? We then take our kids to that private school.
Yeah.
But we don't realize that what making that private school so great is because people keep giving to it.
Yeah.
Right? They keep donating to it. Oh, the cricket team needs new bats. They're going to donate to it. This person needs this. They're going to donate to it. So the difference between what those guys are doing over there in the places that we want to go to and what we are doing over is that the people over there just have ownership. They don't ask, they don't complain about what's not working. They ask, how can we make it work? And how can we be part of the solution? These guys have a fire department that's fully volunteer based. So everyone who works for that fire department is a volunteer.
Wow.
Including the guy who owns the bank, including the guy who owns the insurance company. So they all have, so when there's a fire, they all get an alert and they all go to the fire station, which is like a kilometer away, and then they go to do the fire.
Wow.
So think about it from that perspective. When was the last time we cut the grass outside? Or when was the last time we took initiative of what our neighborhood should be? But it's the same thing. So if you don't like whatever you think you don't like right now, it's not going to change until you do something about it. So you're going to keep complaining about the combis, about the mshiga, about the because you haven't made a transport system, because you haven't demanded one from who you were supposed to make it. And like everything else, we want things to be given to us, so we don't create anything. We don't allow ourselves to grow and to make the places that we are great, or to make it home the way it's supposed to be home. I don't know. Hopefully we'll get it right.
I hope so too. I really do. Thank you so much. Sure, there are just so many nuggets. There are a lot, and thank you for just blessing us with your wisdom and your experience, and for coming onto this podcast, taking the time out to be here. Thank you.
Keep
so
creating.
much. Thank you.
Keep creating and keep doing great things.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
So we have reached the end of yet another episode of Capture the Thoughts. Until next time, goodbye.